The wall clock above the counter ticked toward midnight, its steady rhythm the only sound in the little cafe on a rain-washed street in Victoria Island. Outside, the world had gone silent. Street lamps cast their soft yellow glow on slick sidewalks, the occasional passing car sending ripples across shallow puddles. Inside, the warmth of golden lights pooled across the cafe's wooden tables, reflecting against bare brick walls and the neat rows of novels stacked on an old shelf. Lynette Maxwell was tired. She stifled a yawn as she wiped down the final table, her hands moving with the practiced speed of someone who had done this countless nights before. A faint cinnamon candle burned low on the counter, its soft fragrance mingling with the sharper, richer scent of roasted coffee beans. She stacked the last chair, stretched her sore arms, and muttered under her breath, "Sometimes I really do feel like a superwoman." Her voice cracked into a small, self-amused laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. Running the cafe alone after her mother's passing had been both a burden and a lifeline. Each night she told herself the same thing. Just one more day, one more chance to keep her dream alive. She was reaching for the lights when a knock broke through the quiet. Firm, deliberate, not impatient, not frantic, but steady, like someone asking politely for more time. Lynette froze, her hand hovering above the switch. Midnight. Who on earth would knock on her cafe door at this hour? Her gaze drifted to the window. Outside, under the drizzle, stood a tall man in a black suit. His tie hung slightly askew, his face striking under the dim streetlight's strong jawline, broad shoulders, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He looked nothing like her usual late-night customers. He lifted a hand and gestured, his lips forming words she couldn't hear but understood. "Just one cup of coffee, please." She hesitated. Her rule was ironclad, no service after closing. The streets weren't safe and she had promised herself never to break it. But something about the way he stood there, drenched yet composed, his gaze lingering on the warm glow inside like a child staring through a bakery window, tugged at her resolve. "Maybe he's drunk," she whispered, though he didn't sway or stagger. Or maybe just lonely. With a sigh, she cracked the door open. The cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain. "Sorry, the cafe is closed," she said firmly. The man inclined his head slightly. When he spoke, his voice was low and husky, the kind of voice that carried both authority and weariness. "I know, but just one. One last cup of coffee before the day ends." Lynette blinked, caught off guard by the words. There was something almost poetic in his plea. One last cup before the day ends. Dramatic, yes, but not insincere. She opened her mouth to refuse, but his eyes, tired yet patient, like someone desperate to hold on to a fleeting comfort, stopped her. "Do you even know what time it is?" she asked instead, folding her arms. "Midnight," he answered without hesitation, his lips curving faintly. "The perfect time for coffee." That earned a laugh out of her, despite herself. "Planning to stay awake till morning?" He shrugged, his expression unreadable. "I hardly sleep anyway. One cup won't change that." The quiet bitterness laced in his voice unsettled her more than any threat could have. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't here to cause trouble. He was weary, and something in that weariness resonated with her own. Finally, with another sigh, she pushed the door wider. "All right, just one cup, and then you leave." The man stepped inside, his stride steady, unhurried. He loosened his tie as though shaking off a burden, and for the first time that night, his shoulders dropped slightly. He chose a table near the counter, close enough to watch her work, but not so close as to intrude. "Your cafe is lovely," he said softly, his eyes scanning the warm walls and modest paintings. "Small, but comfortable." Lynette, grinding beans, gave a short chuckle. "Thanks, I opened it because of my mother's dream." "And now, what's your dream?" Her hands froze mid-motion. She lifted her gaze sharply. "What are you, a reporter?" He gave a low chuckle, brief but genuine. "No, just someone who needs coffee and a conversation." The coffee machine hissed, filling the air with a rich aroma. Lynette set a steaming cup before him. He cradled it with both hands, inhaled deeply, and took a slow sip. His eyes closed for a heartbeat, his face softening in quiet relief. Delicious, he murmured. Perhaps the most genuine cup I've had in years. Leonard rolled her eyes but smiled. Careful, or I'll start charging extra for midnight philosophy. If you did, he replied, opening his eyes to meet hers, I'd pay. Her pulse skipped, though she masked it with playful suspicion. You're eccentric. Maybe, he said with a faint shrug, but even eccentrics need coffee. They fell into a rhythm-light banter, quiet laughter. The silence between their words wasn't heavy, but oddly comfortable. For Leonard, used to evenings ending in weary solitude, it felt strange to sit across from someone who listened so intently. After a while, she leaned on the counter, chin in her hand. Do you work this late every night? His lips curved faintly. Always. If I'm not in meetings, I'm reviewing reports, numbers, calls, decisions. The noise never ends. But here, it's quiet. Something in his tone made her pause. Beneath the polish of his suit, in the calmness of his demeanor, was a man carrying a mountain of invisible weight. She offered him a small cookie. Eat. Sugar helps with stress. His gaze lingered on the cookie before he took it, almost reverently. I can't remember the last time someone gave me something without a contract attached. She tilted her head, amused but softened. Well, welcome to Maxwell's Café. No contracts, just coffee. For the first time, he smiled, a real one. Not polite, not practiced, but almost boyish. It made him look younger, less unreachable. When he finished his cup, silence lingered between them. The clock ticked past midnight. Rain tapped against the windows like a gentle drum. Finally, he rose. If I came back tomorrow, would you make me another last cup of coffee? She blinked. At midnight? Again? His faint smile returned, laced with quiet resolve. Sometimes being addicted to something good isn't so bad. Her heart thudded faster than she cared to admit. She pretended to sigh. Fine, but next time come earlier. Midnight isn't good for my beauty sleep. He inclined his head. I'll try. As he moved toward the door, she called out, half teasing, half curious. Hey, stranger, what's your name? He paused, one hand on the doorframe. For a moment, he seemed to debate whether to answer. Then turning slightly, his deep voice carried clearly across the quiet cafe. Williams Anderson. Her breath caught. She knew the name everyone in Lagos did. The elusive CEO of Anderson Group. A man of power and wealth, far removed from her modest cafe. The door closed softly behind him, leaving the golden lights flickering against the silence. Lynette stood frozen, her rag still in hand, her heart racing. She whispered to herself, what on earth just happened? Outside, William stepped into the rain, his face unreadable, but his steps lighter than when he had arrived. And so began a ritual neither of them had expected, a last cup of coffee at midnight, the beginning of something that would change them both. The steady rhythm of midnight had become a ritual. Every night, as the minute hand brushed 12, the familiar knock came soft but insistent, like a secret only two people shared. Lynette Maxwell would roll her eyes, mutter under her breath. The night owl customer is back, but inside, her heart always betrayed her. Williams Anderson kept his word. He came faithfully, sometimes drenched from rain, sometimes with fatigue shadowing his face after endless meetings, sometimes even a few minutes early, waiting outside until the clock struck. Each time he asked for his last cup of coffee. Each time she brewed it, and their midnight conversations stitched themselves into the quiet fabric of her nights. But tonight, the cafe was chaos. Rain had pushed more people indoors, and the small space was bursting with students hunched over laptops, a book club arguing over plot twists, and couples seeking warmth in the cozy golden glow. Orders piled on the counter, mugs clinked in the sink, and the espresso machine hissed relentlessly. Lynette moved like a dancer in fast forward, balancing trays on one arm, steaming milk with the other, and scribbling down notes without missing a beat. The door swung open with its familiar chime, and in stepped Williams. He paused just inside, folding his umbrella neatly, scanning the bustling room with surprise. His usual seat near the counter was taken. His eyes finally found her flushed cheeks, hair slipping loose from its tie, apron dusted with flour. She was clearly drowning. He made his way to the counter, lowering his voice just enough for her to hear. "You look like you're at war." "Don't tease," she shot back breathlessly, pouring milk into a tall glass without looking up. "I'm busy." "Busy?" He raised a brow, glancing at the crowded tables. "This looks like battlefield strategy." "Exactly. And you're in my way," she muttered, grabbing another tray. "Sit down. I'll get to you when I can." But Williams didn't sit. He removed his jacket, laid it carefully on a chair, and began rolling up his sleeves. "Williams," Lynn had warned, catching sight of him in her periphery. "What are you doing?" "Helping." She nearly dropped her tray. "Helping? This is a cafe, not your boardroom. You don't just help here." He smiled faintly, his calm voice betraying no hesitation. "Then consider me a temporary employee. Assign me something ordinary." The word stopped her cold. Ordinary. A billionaire who lived in penthouses, who made headlines with billion-dollar deals, who wore suits tailored in Italy, asking to do something ordinary in her tiny cafe. For a split second, she was torn between horror and amusement. "You'll only get in the way," she said, shaking her head. "Try me." Her eyes narrowed. He wasn't joking. His expression was steady, almost earnest. She dug into a drawer, pulled out the only spare apron she owned, and shoved it at him. It was cream-colored, printed with a cartoon cat winking. He stared at it. She smirked. "Uniform requirement. If you want to help, put it on." To her utter shock, he slipped it over his head without complaint. The sight nearly made her laugh out loud. Williams Anderson Lagos's most elusive billionaire in her cafe kitchen, wearing a cat apron. "All right," she said, biting the inside of her cheek to keep a straight face. "Table 3 needs wiping. Circles, not streaks. Cups go in the sink. Smile at the customers, even when you're just carrying water." "Yes, boss." He lifted the rag like a soldier ready for battle. She rolled her eyes, but couldn't stop the grin tugging at her lips. The students barely looked up as he moved toward their table, but the book club fell silent, staring in disbelief. Williams, unbothered, bent down and carefully wiped the table in stiff, calculated movements. Streaks smeared across the surface. Line had followed, demonstrating. "Gentle circles. Lower your hand, like this." He tried again, this time smoother. "So there's technique to wiping tables. I thought it was just wiping." "Nothing is just anything," she teased. "Do it well and it shows." By the time he moved on to carrying a tray, half the cafe was sneaking glances. His tall frame, impeccable posture, and that absurd apron made him look like an undercover actor in a comedy skit. He carried the drinks steadily until he clipped a chair. The lattes wobbled dangerously. Lynn lunged to steady one, her heart leaping. "Heavens, were you trying to baptize my cafe in milk?" He chuckled, a low sound that warmed her more than the coffee. "My reflexes are slower. At the office, the only tray I carry is a slide deck." Lynn burst into laughter, bending over the counter. "Stick to dish duty." At the sink, he slipped on gloves with more seriousness than most executives wore at board meetings. She guided him step by step. Warm water, not too hot. Scrub rims carefully. Rinse until clear. He nodded solemnly, repeating each instruction like gospel. Then crash. A cup slipped from his hand and shattered. His shoulders stiffened, and for a moment he looked like a schoolboy caught in trouble. "I'll pay for it." "It's fine," she said lightly, crouching to pick up the pieces. "Broken cup for another. What matters is if you're tired. You okay?" Something softened in his eyes. He exhaled slowly. "I am. Oddly enough, I feel lighter, not ashamed." "Good," she said with a wink. "We don't measure broken cup KPIs here, but we do track smiles." For the first time in years, Williams laughed without restraint. Customers turned, startled, watching the cold CEO chuckle in a cat apron as if he belonged there. And then it happened. Click. A curly-haired student snapped a photo. His friend whispered, "Isn't that Williams Anderson, the billionaire? Washing dishes?" Lynette froze. Her stomach twisted. Oh no! But Williams didn't flinch. He simply kept working, his calm expression unshaken. When she approached him, panicked, he leaned closer, murmuring so only she could hear. It's fine. It's been a long time since someone treated me like anyone else. Let the photo spread. Let it be ordinary. By midnight, the crowd thinned. The students left grinning. The book club whispered excitedly, and one older man clapped Williams on the back as if he were an old friend. Good job, young man. You'll make a fine waiter yet. Williams inclined his head respectfully, accepting the compliment without pride. When the door finally closed behind the last customer, Lynette leaned against the counter, exhausted. He stood nearby, wiping his damp hands on the cat apron. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither spoke. You were ridiculous, she said finally. Ridiculous. He raised a brow. In that apron. Her lips curved despite herself. But, thank you. He shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. Tonight I learned 3 things. Wipe tables in circles. Rinse cups by sound. And, his gaze locked on hers. A smile can unlock even the heaviest day. Her heart stuttered. She turned quickly to stack mugs, hiding her flushed cheeks. But inside, she knew something had shifted. Outside, Lagos buzzed. By morning, social media would be on fire. Billionaire CEO spotted washing dishes in cat apron at small cafe. Memes would flood timelines. Gossip blogs would speculate. But in this little cafe, golden light still lingering on the brick walls. It wasn't about rumors or headlines. For Williams, tonight had been a reprieve. A reminder that he wasn't just a tycoon or a headline. He was a man who could laugh, break a cup, and feel human again. And for Lynette, though she would never admit it aloud, the sight of him fumbling with a rag and grinning in that ridiculous apron would stay etched in her heart far longer than any viral headline ever could. The invitation came as casually as if he were asking her to refill his coffee cup. Williams leaned across the counter one evening, the familiar golden glow of the cafe softening the sharp lines of his face. His tie was loosened, his eyes faintly shadowed by fatigue. Yet there was a spark in them that unnerved Lynette. There's a gala at the Echo Hotel tomorrow night, he said, tone even, as though announcing a board meeting. I'd like you to come with me. Lynette nearly dropped the spoon she was drying. A gala? At Echo Hotel? With you? Yes, he said unfazed. She blinked at him, her heart thudding. The Echo Hotel galas were infamous in Lagos society, rooms filled with chandeliers, designer gowns, paparazzi flashes, and the kind of whispered politics that made or broke fortunes. She had read about them, overheard customers gossip about them, but never imagined stepping foot into one. Williams, she said finally, shaking her head. I'm not the gala type. I'd look like I wandered in by mistake. That's exactly why I want you there, he replied, his lips curving faintly. Everyone else plays a part. You don't. I want ordinary, real. His words disarmed her, but also terrified her. Still, when he looked at her with that steady gaze, she found herself saying the one word she thought she never would. All right. The next evening, Lynette stood before the cracked mirror in the small room above the cafe. She wore a pale blue dress, simple yet elegant, one her mother had bought her years ago for special occasions. She had paired it with a delicate silver necklace, the only piece of jewelry she owned of real value. Her hair fell in soft waves down her shoulders. She looked at her reflection and whispered, "Do I look like I'm walking into the wrong place?" A knock at the door made her jump. When she opened it, Williams was there, transformed. His black tuxedo fit him flawlessly, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. For once, his tie was perfectly straight. He looked every inch the man who dominated boardrooms and front-page headlines. But when he saw her, he stopped mid-breath. His gaze swept over her, lingering not with criticism, but with quiet awe. "You look beautiful," he said softly. Heat rushed to her cheeks. She scoffed lightly, trying to mask her nerves. "You sound like a commercial." Let's go before we're late. The Echo Hotel ballroom glittered like a palace. Crystal chandeliers spilled light across marble floors polished to glass. Tables draped in silk glistened with crystal flutes and silver cutlery. A jazz quartet played softly in the corner, while Lagos's wealthiest drifted in clusters. Politicians, CEOs, socialites in gowns that sparkled like sequins of the sea. And then the cameras turned. As Williams and Lynette stepped through the grand entrance, a barrage of flashes lit up the air like lightning. Paparazzi voices clashed. "Mr. Anderson, who's your companion? Smile this way." Their questions sharp and fast. Lynette froze, instinctively stepping closer to him. Williams leaned down, his voice calm against her ear. "Relax. Pretend they're just cafe customers. Just more of them." "More," she hissed. "Feels like an entire stadium." He gave her a faint smile, steadying her with the warmth of his palm at her back. The touch anchored her, even as whispers rose around them. "Who's that with him? She doesn't look like the usual models or businesswomen. Too natural, too plain. Surely not." Each word struck Lynette like a pinprick. Her palms grew damp, and the ballroom, for all its glitter, felt suffocating. But Williams remained unbothered. Each time he stopped to greet someone, he introduced her simply, "This is Lynette, my friend." No grand titles, no elaborate explanations. Just her name, spoken with a weight that made her feel seen, even in a crowd eager to dismiss her. At one table, a chairwoman in a jeweled gown eyed Lynette curiously. "And what do you do, my dear?" Lynette swallowed, forcing her voice to stay steady. "I run a small cafe, just a modest one, but I like to think every cup of coffee has its own story." The woman blinked in surprise, then smiled. "That sounds far more delightful than our endless reports." The table chuckled in agreement, and Lynette caught Williams watching her with quiet pride, his gray eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. For a fleeting moment, she almost felt like she belonged. Then came the question that shattered it. A reporter cut across the room, camera raised, voice sharp. "Mr. Anderson, is this your new girlfriend?" The chatter stilled. Heads turned. Lynette's pulse spiked, her throat tightening. She had no idea what to say, whether to laugh, deny, or hide. But Williams didn't hesitate. His hand rested lightly against her back, his smile calm yet mischievous. "She's the only person who's ever made me wear a cat apron and wash dishes," he said. "Do you know anyone more extraordinary?" The ballroom erupted in laughter. The tension broke like glass underfoot. Even the reporter faltered, unsure how to spin the remark. Cameras flashed again, capturing Williams's bright smile and Lynette's wide-eyed expression. Lynette wanted to sink through the floor, but when she glanced at Williams, his gaze was unwavering, full of quiet mischief and something else, something tender. Against her will, her lips curved into a laugh too. And in that moment, she realized he wasn't protecting himself with that humor. He was protecting her. Hours later, when the gala ended and the flashes faded, they slipped outside into the Lagos night. The city lights shimmered across the lagoon, and the humid air carried the scent of sea salt and rain. Inside the car, Lynette leaned back, exhausted, her fingers twisted in her lap as she whispered, "I'm definitely going to be in the papers tomorrow." "No doubt," Williams replied lightly, his hands steady on the wheel. "But for me, tonight was worth more than any headline." She turned, startled by the depth in his voice. His eyes weren't the cold, calculating ones she had read about in business magazines. They were warm, searching, fixed on her as if she were the only truth in a room full of lies. Her heart thudded painfully. She looked away quickly, forcing a grin to mask the rush inside her chest. "All right, night owl customer, but next time give me a warning before throwing me to the wolves." He chuckled softly, the sound rich and low. "Promise. But who knows? Maybe the unplanned moments become the best memories." She smiled faintly but didn't answer, because deep down, beneath her laughter, a seed of fear had already taken root. She couldn't shake the whispers. "Doesn't look like the usual models. Too plain. Surely not." Williams might have brushed them off with humor, but she had felt each word slice into her. The gap between their worlds had never felt wider. And though she had enjoyed the night, though she had laughed with him under crystal chandeliers, she couldn't help but wonder, what if the whispers were right? That night, back in her small room above the cafe, Lynette removed her necklace and set it gently on the dresser. She caught her reflection in the mirror. Pale blue dress wrinkled, hair undone, eyes weary but restless. She thought of the glittering ballroom, of cameras flashing like lightning, of Williams standing tall beside her without flinching. And for the first time since their midnight ritual began, she wondered whether ordinary and extraordinary could truly sit at the same table. In another part of the city, high above the lagoon in his penthouse suite, Williams sat in silence, tie loosened, the faint glow of headlines already buzzing on his phone. He didn't care what the papers would say. What mattered was the way Lynette had smiled at him despite her nerves, the way her voice had steadied when she spoke about her cafe. Yet even he knew the night had left a crack, and love, however unexpected, was never free of fractures. The cafe felt strangely hollow that morning, though sunlight spilled through the wide windows, glinting off the polished wood. Lynette Maxwell had barely unlocked the door when her neighbor burst in, a folded newspaper clutched in her hand, excitement burning in her eyes. "Lynette, have you seen it?" she asked breathlessly. Without waiting for an answer, she laid the paper flat on the counter. The headlines screamed in bold black letters, "Williams Anderson engaged to Lancaster heiress." Beneath it was a glossy photo. Williams, sharp in his tuxedo, standing beside a tall, elegant woman in a crimson gown at some conference abroad. The heiress's hand rested lightly on his arm, her smile flawless, their figures side by side like a perfectly rehearsed portrait. The paper might as well have been a dagger. Lynette's breath caught, her fingers trembling as she touched the edge of the photograph. Her stomach twisted violently, memories flashing against her will. Williams clumsily rinsing cups in her cafe sink, laughing in the ridiculous cat apron, leaning close at the gala with a mischievous smile that had steadied her in the storm of whispers. She heard again his words, "You're extraordinary. You're real." And now this. The world outside her cafe was already buzzing. Customers whispered as they passed, some pointing discreetly, others openly gossiping. "Did you see the paper? That cafe girl must have just been a friend. Of course, what did she expect? He belongs in that world, not here." Each comment sliced her open. She forced herself to smile at the neighbor, murmuring thanks, then sat alone behind the counter, staring at the photo until her eyes blurred with tears. By evening, her chest felt like a cage of broken glass. When the clock neared midnight, she switched off the lights early, heart thudding painfully. She told herself she wouldn't wait for the knock tonight. She couldn't bear it. But the knock came anyway. Firm, steady, 3 raps against the glass. Her entire body tensed. She pressed her hands to her ears, whispering, "Don't open it. Don't listen." The knock came again, louder this time. "Lynette," his voice called, muffled but clear. "It's me." Tears welled instantly. She curled onto the floor behind the counter, arms wrapped tight around her knees. She couldn't look at him, couldn't face those eyes she had begun to trust. "Please open the door," Williams's voice carried through the storm that had begun outside. Rain lashed against the awning, thunder rolling low across the lagoon. She could picture him, tall, unyielding, standing in the downpour. She bit her lip hard, choking back a sob. "Why?" she whispered to the darkness. "Why let me believe I mattered?" Outside, his voice broke through again, louder now, desperate. "Lynette, listen to me. It's not true. That photo, those headlines, they're lies. I never promised her anything. I never wanted anyone but you." Her tears spilled freely, hot trails down her cheeks. She pressed her forehead against her knees, shaking. The sound of his hand against the door came next, steady, pleading. "Don't shut me out, please. I'll stand here all night if I have to." The storm raged, water pounding the street. lightning flashing across the lagoon. Passers-by stopped, astonished to see the scene. Lagos's most powerful billionaire, drenched to the bone, knocking again and again on the door of a small cafe, his voice raw with desperation. Inside, Linad's chest heaved with sobs she couldn't silence. She longed to throw open the door, to let him in, to believe every word, but the image of the headline and the perfect heiress clung to her mind like chains. She could still hear her friends warning about loving a man from that world. It will break you. It always does. So she stayed in the dark, clutching the necklace her mother had left her, whispering through trembling lips, "This will be the last cup of coffee. The real last one." Outside, Williams remained. Hours passed, the rain soaking his suit, plastering his hair to his forehead, but he didn't move. He stayed there, knocking softly, murmuring her name as if it were the only truth left in him. 3 days later, Lagos erupted. Reporters swarmed outside coal industries' headquarters. Social media burned with speculation. The Lancaster family fueled the rumors, refusing to deny the engagement. Shares in Anderson's companies wavered. And then suddenly, an announcement. Emergency press conference. The hall at Victoria Island was packed. Journalists pressed shoulder to shoulder, cameras flashing even before the man of the hour stepped on stage. Williams Anderson appeared in his usual sharp suit, though shadows of exhaustion lined his face. He adjusted the mic, his jaw tight, and let silence fall before speaking. "Ladies and gentlemen," his deep voice rolled across the room, firm and steady. "The rumors of a marriage between myself and Miss Lancaster are entirely false." The hall erupted in murmurs, questions thrown like darts. He raised a hand, silencing them. "Yes, photographs were taken. They were at a conference, a business obligation. Nothing more. These rumors were deliberately fabricated by rivals to damage our reputation. And I have proof." The giant screen behind him lit up with leaked emails and documents, exposing a smear campaign orchestrated by a competitor. Gas rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed like lightning. But Williams wasn't finished. His voice lowered, deepened, and when he spoke again, it was not as the untouchable CEO, but as a man stripped of pretense. "I want to make one more thing clear," he said slowly, each word deliberate. "The person I want by my side is no one else, but the girl who owns a small cafe on Victoria Island. The girl who made me laugh in a cat apron while teaching me how to wash cups. The only place I've found peace in years is in her cafe at midnight with a cup of coffee she brewed herself." The room exploded. Reporters shouted over one another, microphones thrust forward. "Who is she? Are you confirming a relationship? Is this the first time you've spoken about her publicly?" But Williams didn't flinch. He smiled faintly, his gray eyes bright under the lights. "She's the only one who reminds me I'm human too. And I have no reason to hide that." Back in her cafe, Linda sat frozen before her laptop, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. She had sworn she wouldn't watch. She had sworn she wouldn't believe. But his words cut through every fear, every whisper of doubt. "The girl who made me laugh in a cat apron. The only place I've found peace in years is in her cafe." Her hands trembled around the coffee mug she hadn't touched. She pressed it to her lips, but her sobs broke through before she could drink. "Williams," she whispered, voice cracking, "you're absolutely crazy." Outside, Lagos thundered with headlines, social feeds aflame with clips of his confession. But inside the cafe, the golden light seemed softer than ever. The world had heard his truth, and for the first time, so had she. Her heart still ached with fear, but somewhere in the cracks of her doubt, a fragile seed of hope began to grow again. The cafe was quiet again, too quiet. For 3 nights since the press conference, Lynon had stood at the counter after closing, staring at the door, half expecting, half dreading the familiar knock at midnight. Each night, silence answered her. No soft rap against the glass, no steady voice calling her name. The absence was almost worse than the storm of gossip that had followed his public confession. The city hadn't stopped buzzing. Every blog, every newspaper, Every social feed replayed the clip of Williams Anderson standing before flashing cameras, declaring his heart belonged to a cafe owner. Some mocked him, others romanticized him. Many speculated endlessly about her. Yet Lynette remained hidden in her little cafe, the whispers seeping through the walls until her chest felt caged. She told herself she should be relieved. He had defended her, had chosen her. What more proof could she want? But still her doubts gnawed at her. How long before he realizes I don't belong? Before the pressure swallows me? Before he regrets it? On the fourth night, the rain returned. Heavy, relentless sheets blurred the streets and rattled the awning above the cafe door. Lynette was wiping down the counter when she heard it. The knock. 3 soft, deliberate raps. Her breath caught. She froze, rag in hand. The knock came again, louder. "Lynette," his voice carried through the storm. "Please open the door." Her heart pounded, torn between fear and longing. Slowly she stepped toward the glass. And there he was. Williams stood in the downpour, rain soaking his suit, his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked nothing like the polished billionaire the city worshipped. He looked human, vulnerable, trembling. Something inside her cracked. She unlocked the door. He stumbled in with a rush of rain and cold air. For a moment, neither spoke. Water dripped from his sleeves, pooling at his feet, his chest heaving as though he'd been running. Then he whispered, voice hoarse, "I thought you'd never let me in again." Lynette swallowed hard, her throat tight. "Why are you here, Williams?" His eyes found hers, and she saw it then. The rawness, the exhaustion, the fragile truth behind the armor he always wore. He stepped closer, his voice breaking. "Because I can't stand the thought of losing you." The words hit her like a wave. He ran a hand through his wet hair, trembling slightly. "Do you know what my life has been for the past 10 years? Meetings, contracts, boardrooms, people smiling to my face while sharpening knives behind my back. Not a single person who wanted me for me. And then," his voice caught, almost a whisper. "You, with your coffee, your stubborn honesty, your ridiculous cat apron. You don't know what you've done to me." Tears burned her eyes, but she shook her head. "Williams, you're used to people leaving. What if I can't handle it? What if the pressure—" "I don't care about the pressure," he cut in, his voice fierce now. He stepped closer, closing the space between them, rain still dripping from his clothes. "I care about you. I'm terrified of losing the only place I've ever felt at peace. Don't shut me out, Lynette, please. I'll give up every boardroom, every gala, every headline if it means I still have this cafe at midnight with you." Her chest heaved, her heart breaking under the weight of his words. And then he whispered the one truth that shattered her last defense. "I'm lonely, Lynette. I've been surrounded by people my entire life, but I've never been seen. Not until you. You're the first person who's ever looked at me and not seen a billionaire, but just a man." Her vision blurred as the tears finally fell, unstoppable. She covered her face, sobbing softly, but he reached forward, pulling her gently into his arms. She resisted for a moment, then collapsed against his chest, her fists clutching the damp fabric of his shirt. He held her tightly, his own breath shaking. "Cry if you need to. Just don't push me away. I'd rather drown in this rain every night than live one more day without you in my life." The storm raged outside, thunder shaking the windows. But inside the cafe there was only the sound of her sobs against his chest and his steady voice murmuring promises into her hair. When her tears slowed, she pulled back slightly, her face wet with tears and his rain. "You're insane, you know that?" she whispered, her lips trembling into a faint smile. He brushed a strand of wet hair from her face, his thumb tender against her cheek. "Then let me be insane, as long as it's with you." Something broke free in her then. The fear, the doubt, the whispers of not belonging, all of it dissolved under the fierce honesty in his eyes. She pressed her forehead to his, her voice barely audible. "Don't make promises you can't keep." "I won't," he said firmly. "Not this time." From that night on, everything changed. Williams didn't stop coming to the cafe at midnight, but he no longer sat as just the customer at table 3. He rolled up his sleeves without waiting for her to ask, tied on the ridiculous cat apron, and learned to make lattes with wobbly hearts in the foam. He carried trays, wiped tables, broke more than a few cups, and every time he failed, he laughed, really laughed, the sound filling the cafe like a new kind of music. Customers gawked, of course. Phones clicked, headlines followed. Billionaire CEO spotted serving coffee again, but neither of them cared anymore. To the world it was scandal, spectacle, novelty. To them it was sanctuary. When the cafe transformed, it wasn't just Lynad's burden to carry anymore. It became their place, hers and his, where coffee brewed not just from beans, but from healing, where the ordinary became extraordinary because it was theirs. One night as they stood side by side behind the counter, cleaning up after a long day, Williams caught her hand mid-motion. She turned, startled, meeting his steady gaze. "Do you realize what you've done to me?" he asked quietly. She tilted her head, her lips curving faintly. "Taught you how to rinse cups properly?" He shook his head, smiling. "No, you've given me back my life." Her chest tightened, her hand squeezing his. For the first time, she didn't feel like an outsider in his world. She felt like they had built one of their own, here in this little cafe, with nothing more than coffee, laughter, and promises spoken over midnight rain. And in that haven, their love, ordinary yet extraordinary, finally felt like home. Months later, Victoria Island carried the cool hush of December evenings. The cafe windows glowed against the night, golden light spilling across the damp pavement. Inside, soft jazz drifted over the hum of voices, the shelves lined with holiday tins, and the warm scent of cinnamon lingering in the air. It had become a familiar sight to everyone in Lagos. The billionaire CEO behind the counter, sleeves rolled, apron tied, pouring coffee like it was the most natural thing in the world. At first it had been a scandal, then a fascination. Now it was simply accepted that if you wanted the city's most expensive merger signed, you might have to wait, because Williams Anderson was busy bussing tables in a small cafe. Lena watched him from behind the counter, her lips curving into a private smile. He was wiping down a table, brow furrowed in concentration as if each streak of glass were a boardroom deal. He caught her staring and raised an eyebrow. "What, you're not going to critique my form?" She shook her head, laughter dancing in her eyes. "You finally learned circles. I'm impressed." He smirked, setting the rag aside, and came toward her. But there was something in his stride tonight, an unusual restlessness. He moved behind the counter, reaching for the espresso machine with more focus than usual. "Go on," Lynette teased, folding her arms. "Let's see what masterpiece you'll make this time. Another tadpole pretending to be a heart?" Williams didn't answer. He poured the milk carefully, his hands steadier than she had ever seen. Steam hissed softly. The room seemed to quiet as he tilted the pitcher, shaping the foam with uncharacteristic precision. Lena leaned closer, curious. The milk swirled, then formed letters. Her breath caught. Across the cappuccino's surface, in white foam against dark espresso, the words appeared. "Marry me." She froze, her throat tight, her hands trembling against the counter. When she lifted her gaze, Williams was already watching her. No audience, no press, no boardroom. Just him, just her. His voice was low, steady, every word carrying the weight of years he had never shared with anyone else. "I've had everything, companies, mansions, power, but none of it meant home. You gave me that with every midnight cup. Lynette Maxwell, will you marry me?" The cafe stilled. Even the customers, sensing something extraordinary, hushed. The old man with his newspaper lowered it with misty eyes. The group of students held their breaths. A child's giggle broke softly in the corner before silence swallowed the room again. Tears welled in Lynette's eyes. She cupped the warm cappuccino with both hands, staring at the trembling words before looking back at him. Memories rushed through her. The first midnight knock, his clumsy dishwashing in the cat apron, his laughter echoing for the first time in years, his rain-soaked confession at the door. Every broken cup, every promise, every smile had led here. Her lips curved into a trembling smile, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, her voice breaking. "Yes, Williams. Yes." The cafe erupted. Applause, cheers, laughter. Customers rose to their feet, clapping as Williams came around the counter, dropping to one knee with a small velvet box in his hand. He opened it to reveal a simple, elegant silver ring. Not flashy, not ostentatious. Perfect. "This," he said, voice unsteady, "is the only contract in my life I don't want to negotiate." She laughed through her tears, holding out her hand. "As long as you keep wearing the cat apron." Laughter rippled again. Williams slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms. The cafe glowed brighter, their embrace framed in golden light, coffee and cinnamon scent wrapping them like a blessing. Outside, Lagos glittered, the city alive with its endless rush. But inside the cafe, two souls sat at last in a place where love was both ordinary and extraordinary. That night, as snow-like drizzle misted the streets, Leonard whispered against his chest, "Love doesn't need palaces or power. Just one last honest cup of coffee is enough." Williams kissed her hair, his voice warm against her ear. "And I promise you'll never drink that last cup alone again."